I'm noticing a trend, and that is that hard heads create great change. Now, by hard heads, I don't necessarily mean left brain, right? Some people might say. I mean people who might have this ego of non-ego. Oh, I'm doing this for everybody, and man, everybody needs this information. Everybody needs this, I'm the only way, this is the only solution, all that type of stuff, right? I don't have an ego, they have an ego, comparisons between themselves and others. And a lot of us are prone to comparisons, especially as we attain something that other people may not, right? And so this is why I usually say the word right, or say we, and sort of include people in, because we shouldn't really make outcasts, and we should understand that everybody is sort of just human beings living different experiences, and so they have certain things going on. Now, I admire different communities, but I've gotten a lot of influence from different communities and seeing sort of their leadership and seeing how they operate things. And so I'm talking about all sorts of different communities, political or not, social, meetups, whatever, right? Gatherings, it doesn't matter. And I notice certain trends, and one of those trends is this hard-headed mentality, okay? And so I'm trying to bring people together, and the problem is these hardheads will claim, well, everybody's dividing and everybody's dividing. But if they stay so much on their own path of they figured out the world already, they can create more division themselves, and they don't always realize that. My goal is to bring people together and to say, well, you're not the only solution, I'm not the only solution. I create a movement, you may have a movement. There's one way to teach this knowledge, there's another way to teach this knowledge, and there's no reason why we can't utilize all of that. It's one of the reasons why, like Patrick Smith, for example, when I, did that conversation with him, I'm like, bro, I like your anti-subjectivist manifesto. I like what you're doing. I like the fact you're questioning Mark Passio. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because discourse is good and necessary. And they came from it from a very respectful position, which I absolutely don't mind at all, Despite there being some perspective problems on my end or their end, I mean, who knows? It's just humans doing human stuff, but nobody is imposing our will saying, you have to follow this or that. And that was like the main point that I was trying to make, is like, can we just look at people and understand where they're coming from? Create more unity rather than division. Instead of finding out what they disagree with you on, find out what they agree with you on, and then build from that. It's the same way how we might talk to people who are of a status mentality, which if you don't know about, I'll put 5 questions on the screen for you. If people are of this mentality of, I need authority, I need rulers, I need masters, I need people to control me, they have some sort of conscience inside of them that knows that it's wrong to impose their will on others, and just know that violence is wrong. They just don't connect to politics. They don't question morality in relation to that. So although they disagree with you based on their actions and based on their current beliefs that they tell you and say, oh, I support this candidate, I support this party, what have you, you are coming from it and saying, well, let's bring this down to a human level, a natural level, where we can understand, like, hey, you and I, we're just humans, we're not special, they're not special, we can't make anybody more special than anyone else, really. If they have leadership abilities, great, they can influence people, but why should they impose it on others with violence? Right? And so you just appeal to their common sense, and most people know that violence is wrong, right? So this is part of the reason why I really like Larkin Rose's works, because it's very simple, common sense. He's not trying to create anything new, simply remind people of the root cause, which is statism, the mentality. But I also look at Mark Passio's work and to say, hey, having this compendium of natural law that looks at all these different aspects around statism also hits at the root pretty darn hard, because the people who wake up to that are going to get literally waking up to everything else, because they get this fuller picture, right? And they can put it under this term natural law, which I think is the reason why it also appealed to me greatly. Also just seeing the word natural in general implies that it's universal and timeless, something I'm interested in because it applies everywhere, and it's something that then people need to know. As I always say, nature is the answer. So that, you know, different crowds are going to appeal to different people, and that's beautiful. That's why we should have different works and different types of materials being shared, and different people all sharing their unique ability, which is why I encourage you produce content yourself in one form or another, even if it's just writing articles and I turn them into videos for you like I do in the newspaper project. But without saying, that's not the only way to do things, right? And I'm not claiming to have the only way. I never do. Now, I may say natural law and statism is the root cause to a lot of what's going on, but you still can decide for yourself, and I'm not claiming to say, like, I know all of it, and they're all wrong, but I do question and say, well, everyone in politics is not looking at the right, you know, thing to look at. Now, of course, again, like anything I say, you should question it. Absolutely. But even I, when I came across the same knowledge that I now share, questioned it at the time, right? And so it's funny how that works. But we must understand, like, there are people who do not understand what you are sharing and what you're telling other people. And so you have to bring things back down to that individual level and have an open heart and have an open mind, no matter how much you want to close yourself off from them and alienate yourself and feel special or have an ego. It's none of them matter here. None of them matter to do. You know, their justifications for saying that they're important or have this non-ego ego, I mean, it's not wrong, right? But their delivery can be. So this is the thing, right? People can be right about a lot of things in the world, but their delivery may not come off so right. And some people may have just a hard time with that delivery. And that's part of the reason why I like to look at intent, and why sometimes I'll defend people on my channel and say, hey, look at this YouTuber, look at this person who's getting a lot of attack on the internet. And if I feel like that person isn't getting really enough support, then I'll probably make a video about it, if I know about it, that is, which I don't usually go on the internet that much for many other reasons. I mean, that's, you know, countless to say. It's important to see that so many people are focused on unnatural facts, as I'll call it, things that are out of their control. They're taking purely on faith, right? Presidents, events in history, events that are happening miles away, they have no clue this stuff is happening, but they believe it, and so they talk about it, and then they do research and they think they know all about it, right? And it sort of can form a hard head. And it's funny to me because every part of that hard head, even from the very beginning steps, is like, how do you know that? How do you even know any of those facts? Can you verify any of that? I mean, you really can't. You're supposed to verify it by particular sources, like what, government sources or not? Like, you know, you can look at footage and you can look at witnesses and victims and all that stuff. I mean, still, it's hard, right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at things in history, you know, look at different theories of different kinds for different subjects, but is it really as important as the universal timeless, that of which has always existed, and that of which we are meant to know, right? Because there's a lot of things that are here to distract us, and we can distract ourselves if we're not careful. And that is what happened with this complicated media technology consumer world. Everybody's got their own podcast, or everybody's a consumer of a podcast. You know what I mean? That is sort of the world we live in. And where's the time where you sit back and enjoy life? Where's the time where you sit back and say, I don't need any of that. I don't need to be the consumer or even the producer. I can produce simply by being myself. And if I am the producer, then, you know, I'm encouraging other people to produce themselves, sort of like a natural leader, right? So, sorry to clear my throat. Morality and health is something that I often see, you know, may not be talked about. And these are very important topics. But why is statism the most important, right? People talk about all sorts of topics, and, you know, I want to say morality and health is like probably some of the most important things, but statism is what has to do with both of these and really hits at the root to everything. Why do I say statism is the most important? Well, it's because no matter what you're trying to do in the world, no matter what you think is important, statism deals with imposing what you think is important. So that's why I focus on that, because it's, again, not bringing anything new into the equation. It's saying, okay, you have these thoughts, you think they're important, great, educate people, let them know, you know, make it happen. But don't force them to do it. Don't you do it with violence. And so is that really hard to ask for, right? And another thing people will do is disgrace the past, right? The past or philosophy or anything, really. They'll disgrace certain things. Oh, it's this, I don't want to hear about it. Oh, it's that, I don't want to hear about it. Oh, it's this person in the past, I don't want to hear about it. Just because, and I talk about unnatural facts, we can't verify history, does not mean we just disgrace the past. And also, a lot of people make assumptions about our ancestors and people who have lived thousands of years ago. I have no clue what they did thousands of years ago. How did the pyramids get built? We want to say they're cavemen and we're evolved, we're a great species. Yeah, we're not also the greatest species. You can come at it from the perspective of, wow, we're amazing, we have conscience, and we ended chattel slavery. Or you can come from the perspective of, wow, there's still so much work to be done, and there's war and violence all the time, and people are ignorant. I mean, no matter what, you can say, oh, well, we're de-evolving because we're becoming infertile and we're having all these problems and diseases. And then you could say, well, we are evolving because now we have, these lifespans and this and that, material things and technology and knowledge and mass media. I mean, you can come at it from these different perspectives. And if people aren't open to all of these, I think there's a big issue. And so maybe, what it is I'm advocating here, and often in my seminar, my naturosophy seminar, is just an open-mindedness. But that's because that is your first layer before you can attain any knowledge. And if you can have an open mind and be the outcast, really be the outcast, it really just means being yourself. It doesn't mean following anything, it just means being yourself. And it's not being the outcast, it's again just being yourself, because naturally you are then the outcast. Naturally you'll find your place, and naturally I came into these communities and I feel welcomed. The Natural Law Community, One Great Work Network, I'm glad to be a part of them, honestly. I'm glad to meet everybody that I've met. I never expected to meet everybody I've met. So those are communities, but I was led there through my own personal journey. Now, not everybody's going to have that same experience. I can't speak for everybody there. I can't speak for everyone in the network, all the content they produce or what have you. I can't speak for the symbology, which I've talked about. I won't personally use, but I'm not against it. See, I can understand what is at play, and I don't have to be offended just because somebody disagrees with me or because whatever. I think we can be friends with everybody, and there's no reason not to be, because, again, if you say there's division everywhere, you probably shouldn't want to be creating more division. The last thing we need is an unreasonable population if you say everybody is unreasonable. You see the contradiction? And this is sort of the non-ego ego that I'm talking about. People saying they're this, and everybody else is not listening, and everybody's not getting it. It's creating this hard's head. Right, and the hardheads also have certain ways of getting things done, and this stubbornness can help them. The stubbornness can be like, okay, I'm driven, I want to get things done. It's a very business mindset, and I was in it too when I was a health coach too. I was very business oriented, like this is the way things have to go, and it helped me prepare to say this is how I can create a movement and how I can market it and such. Having that marketing mindset of, okay, I got to sell this, I got to do that, I got to make sure I plug this and I can connect this to that. I mean, it can be helpful for business, but it's not going to be helpful for what you're trying to actually achieve, which is not business, but actually, changing things. And business is just one way of getting there, but if you let it become the whole deal, then you lose yourself in the process. So it's just something to keep in mind, right? We need reminders. We need people there holding us accountable, asking questions we don't want to hear, so we can get the reminder of what is out there. Otherwise, we'll just shun it out to the rest of the world. We will be asking for ignorance, and we don't want that. Somebody needs to be there reminding you of how important love is, because that is how you understand and recognize how important it is before you just lose it and realize how powerful it is, and then soon you're the one telling everyone how important it is. I mean, we can't disgrace or really underestimate anything in this life. Nature is, a beautiful place and also a destructive place. I say that on purpose, I did a presentation when I was in high school. It said nature is ironic, sort of going alongside that idea of the principle of polarity. Funny enough, I would come across that later in time. But another thing is that obvious truths aren't so obvious to some, right? And the person teaching should recognize this. This has many different implications. So, obvious truths like, oh, well, love leads to order, and love is what changes everything. Love is energy, or natural law is, wow, like more powerful than man's law. It can be pretty obvious to some, but to others it's not so obvious, and then they apply it to more in their life and they realize why it's important. And for the people who are really broken in life or have many broken experiences, the obvious truths can be really, really powerful for them. And so we can't underestimate that either. Again, oh, it's obvious truth. It's like, it's truth. It's not going to be obvious to people in an unnatural world. It may be obvious to you, right? Because of your circumstance and what has happened to you and what you've come to understand. But don't bet that out for everybody. You know, there's a time and place for everything. And they aren't special, you know. None of these hardheads or anybody who's really good at doing things. Anna von Reitz, Mark Passio, some people may call them hardheads because they're driven in what they're trying to do. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but having the open mind doesn't hurt. It actually can help with unity rather than division, because division could happen over time if they're not careful. They have to understand that they're not special and they need to appeal to people. They can't just necessarily, you know, stay in their ways. Now, that being said, if they know something to be the truth, they're going to say, well, this is the truth. It doesn't matter what people think. This is what needs to be said. I greatly respect that. You know, it's like this is the grounded path, but there needs to be also that balance between, okay, I'm going to also be open-minded into appealing to people and making sure that this knowledge can reach more people, and not just a select crowd. So that is, again, where it's like the open-mindedness and the closed-mindedness, the teachability bell curve, as Mark Passio would say. Right, so they are aware of this themselves. A lot of these hardheads, you may say, they're all aware of their own mentality. They're all aware how they can sometimes have that ego and sometimes go on these different trips. They understand that. But that's why there needs to be people like us, because it's not all reliant on them or not reliant on the hardheads. It's not. You know, if you want something done, you have to be the one to create that yourself. If you think something is wrong, you have to be the one to make things right. And if you keep saying, well, you're doing things wrong, it can get just as bad as them saying everybody else is doing things wrong. You see what I mean? So get this fact that religions appeal to people down the deeps, and religions are often very like this. And that's why people will say, hey, this is a religion, when people have such a strong base around a firm grasp of a hardhead, firm grasp of this egoic core doctrine. Now, again, that doctrine does not have to be egoic. The people do not have to be hardheads, but they can come across as that, and they can lose themselves and fall into the traps that society creates, that they themselves create of being so, you know, self-conscious. I mean, there's too many things you have to look at, but it just requires reflection. That's it. And oftentimes, I don't know what people do for reflection techniques, but it would help with what they're trying to do. And I think the businessman who is always rushing all the time, trying to make sure this and that is done in their way, may not always have that reflection time, or they don't really know what reflection means, right? Which is to really evaluate their own mentality. Am I right? Am I wrong? All the time questioning themselves. And so, since religions have a bad reputation nowadays, people have taken spiritual routes, right? And this is how we get the New Age. But now people see that. And so, this is where you have this non-ego ego, is where, okay, now we see the New Age, now we see all these new movements and new ideologies and what's wrong with them. Well, now you're creating a new one that's saying, well, we're not New Age, we're special, we're different. And again, making that comparison is where this ego comes in. Oh, we're not New Age, we're just spiritual. Oh, we're not religious, we're spiritual. And then soon it's going to be, oh, we're not spiritual, we're this or we're that. And, you know, I'm not against this, because it's sort of part of our evolution. It's sort of part of this process. I said stubbornness is not a bad thing, but if if stubbornness keeps getting rooted and clustered into the hard head, which is where heads get harder, then it's harder to break that, right? It's like Mark Passio says, it's that crystal that you have to keep hitting on. You build that crystal structure over time, even thinking that you're not, controlled, or thinking that you're not of a certain mindset. And so we had to just be really stinking conscious. And I know that sounds obvious to some, but again, the obvious truth, it's just a reminder that you're not right and you know nothing. And I think this is part of the reason why all the philosophers, a lot of the great ones of the past that we would refer to as great, because of their contributions, they would say toward the end of their lives or whatever, they know nothing. And that is what it means to know something. It's like the only thing they can know is that they know nothing because of this very fact of the matter. And oftentimes I don't see that quote being shared around enough. And that's probably because of this mentality that gets hardened in people. Oh, I'm an alternative. I'm different. I'm not like that. I'm special. And so you're not. I'm sorry, but just as much as you are, because you're unique. I just want people to live their lives, and then you have both. It's like you're living your life like everyone else. I guess that's what makes you similar to others, but you're living your own life, which makes you unique. And so you have the time and place where you are and where society is, and you're not trying to live up to some sort of identity or image that you're sort of trying to fill into. Even the whole occult idea. I don't talk a lot about occultism. I don't even talk a lot about different theories. I'm aware of so much of it, though. I know a lot about it. The reason why I don't talk about it is simply because I understand its time and place. Is there really a time and place for it? How does it relate to natural facts? And the honest truth is that sometimes it just often doesn't. And there's a reason probably why Larkin Rose doesn't do the same thing, and I can relate to him on that. And I don't intend to. I don't intend to relate to certain people. I don't intend to relate to Mark Passio, and I do a lot. But it just happens because I think they have certain realizations that I have, reflecting upon a lot of the world. And that reflection process, I just can't stress enough of how important it is. And that's why journaling is also important, and taking time away from technology is pretty important. And just getting yourself involved with more people to see how organizations have worked. If all these organizations saw how hard-headed all these other organizations are, they would realize and say, well, I'm better than that. I don't have to be like that, but I also shouldn't then make that my new identity. And so that is where they have to really draw the line, at least in my view, right? Certain things make an impact, and certain other things make a lasting impact. And I will say that natural law will always persist. But despite all these people saying, they have this solution or whatnot, I have to say natural law will always persist. Certain subjects, if they pertain to the natural and to nature, they will always persist. And certain things, like I said, will make an impact, but other things are going to make a lasting impact. And the lasting impact are those things that are necessary. Love, happiness, family, natural law, nature, right? You can't get any greater to some extent than those things when you open your mind to such a great dimension. This is a natural law. It expands, it encompasses the entire world and all peoples. And the more we expand like that, it's greater, because then we can look at more ideas and get thinking more. And I've always journaled about this, but just getting people to think wins. That's it. That's the solution, because people don't want to think. People want to be ignorant. And as, again, that Socrates quote, aside from not knowing anything, he says the only good is knowledge and the only evil is ignorance. So that goes exactly into this matter. But do you want people to think, or do you want people to agree with you? Do you want people to think what you think, or do you want people to think and therefore come to their own conclusions that happen to somehow coincide with yours? And that is sort of where I like to hit at, with the naturosophy, which is technically my philosophy, right? I might talk about abolitionism and the abolitionists, but you can't confirm anything of what happened in history or really what they thought. We have their own words, which is relatively great, and the reason why I think it's relevant is because if you compare it to a lot of other texts that people would consider valid today, these are abolitionists saying from the 1800s, who ended chattel slavery, the very same things we're talking about with government slavery and political slavery and statism. And so that's a unique scenario. You know, Lysander Spooner, all these great guys, but they were also pointing at something very universal. So you don't have to look at them or their image or what they actually did, but the words they said, so you can apply it to your own life, because that's what matters. What the here and now. You know, what did they bring for you? What did they give for you? And this is why we have generations and why we have ancestors. I mean, you have to realize they brought you to where you are. And this is why we can't disgrace the past, because it's just something that made us to who we are. So this is just a video reminder of keeping an open mind, because I do see this again in many communities, hard heads of people who have certain ways of getting things done and think that they know certain things above all people. And maybe it is a more masculine trait. Some people may want to notice as well. Again, sort of left brain-ish, but if you want to call it masculine instead, doesn't matter. I think it's just something that has to be addressed, right? And everybody has that masculine part if we're going to look at that perspective. So if we're going to take it from that perspective, which I think it has a lot of validity to, if we were to just say what makes up masculine, what makes up feminine, and how do we apply it to our lives, this is probably the video to say, there are people participating in the masculine simply by living in this life thinking they have the solution. You know, thinking about that, you know, they have things already figured out. And I ever learn to say I don't have things figured out, even if I learn more knowledge and I come to say, well, I know what I'm talking about. I mean, you would hope that I come on a video or on a presentation knowing what I'm talking about. But I don't, and I actually admit to that, so I know I don't know, and maybe that's a unique dynamic. It's like saying the non-ego, but if I say I don't know, you know, and that there's natures of natures, what I'm doing is I'm encouraging people so they can do the thinking themselves, because it isn't up to me. I'm putting this out for the whole world. I need to know that what I'm doing is for the whole world. You know, so it's not something that's limited to just me, and I'm not the only person in the world. I'm not the only mind. So, thank you very much for watching. This is Corey Angelot, Nature's the Answer. Share your thoughts with me in the comments. I'd be interested to see what you think. I know this was a little bit all over the place, but nonetheless, I think it's important to mention. Thank you. I also want to say that this is not aimed or targeted toward any one individual or group of individuals or whatever. This is really to talk about everybody and to hold everyone accountable, because accountability is education and it keeps us going on the right track. This does not apply to people like Mark Passio. I think he's great. In fact, every interview I do with him, first thing he says is, we can talk about anything you want. I am open to any and all questions. And he kept saying that both times I interviewed him. And it's incredible to have people like that, willing to improve, wanting questions, because that right there is a sign that they're not egoic. Now, of course, we all have egos, and we can fall to that sometimes, but being aware of that, being conscious, and allowing question is a sign that we can move in the right direction. I would encourage anyone else to question me just as you would them, right? It's all about the ideas. Thank you.